Hello, good afternoon, friends. Chelsea Colley here, and I do have a lovely guest today. Welcome, Miss Elizabeth Thorne Kempe.
Hey, how are you?
So good to have you, and we are gonna try this recording it this way. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but tell us in the comments if you can hear her. And Elizabeth, why don't you just go ahead and give us a little background, tell us a little bit about who you are.
All right. I am Elizabeth Thorne Kempe, as Chelsea stated. When I was born with some deformities. I was born with 3 kidneys and an extra large chest cavity. Those 3 kidneys all were malformed and did not work properly. So I ended up getting a lot of...
Elizabeth, why don't you just go ahead and give us a little background, tell us a little bit about who you are.
All right. I am Elizabeth Thorne Kempe.
Sorry about that, Elizabeth. Go ahead. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. Technology difficulties, it's a thing. No problem. Should I speed through my background or should I tell it slowly and talk about all of the health calamities along the way?
Yeah, go ahead and just do kind of like an overview, and then we can kind of like dive down a little bit deeper.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I was born with some deformities. Those deformities led me to needing life-saving surgery by the time I was 8 months old. And then again, I was a very, I would say sometimes a sick child. And my nickname became Elizabeth because I had a hard time keeping things down in my stomach. And I had reoccurring kidney infections and things like that. By the time I was 13, I ended up back in the hospital again because my kidneys had sealed off. But in the process of figuring out what was going on with me, they also removed my appendix. And at that time, the doctor said, well, it's going to be removed for appendix, even though there's nothing wrong with it, because we'll never have to wonder. So that was quite an adventure. At that time in the hospital, they had a very, very, very difficult time keeping me sewn together. My organs kept detaching from each other. So I went in for surgery after surgery after surgery. And then I went home and then I came back for another surgery because they came apart again. It ended up being a very, very excruciating process. And during that process, I had a near-death experience. And I also witnessed my doctors lose a lot of self-confidence in themselves because it was just such a odd thing that was happening to this patient of theirs that they could not keep me stitched together.
And how old did you say you were at the time?
I was 13 and 14. It went over my birthday.
Wow, I'm so
sorry. It lasted
sorry.
for several months. Yeah. Fast forward, and they told me then that I would never be able to have children because of how my body would fall apart and how weak it was. But I did end up having 2 children, and my first pregnancy was very painful. And that's when I learned that I don't respond to anesthesias because nothing, the epidural, nothing worked for me. And I thought, well, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they did it too late. But no, I ended up finding out later they just don't work for me at all. Then I had my second child. And when he was being delivered, we ran into some real major medical problems. And I ended up losing 85% of my blood during his delivery. And he ended up being born in a very high risk situation. He wasn't able to breathe. And so he went to the NICU and I went to ICU, and the next 10 days we weren't able to see each other at all while we both healed. So after this, I really declined in my health rapidly. I'm like, what is going on with my body? Oh, and another thing that happened in pregnancy, my bladder actually quit working entirely. And so one day I woke up and I was just full of fluid, and it was worse than labor pains. It was absolutely horrific. So when I went into the hospital for that and they discovered what was going on, I kept saying, how did this happen? How could this possibly happen? And there was nobody that had an answer for me, just like when they had no answer as to what happened during his delivery process for both him and I. Anyhow, after he was born, I noticed that my strength really did not come back to me like it had when I was younger. And my health just continued to decline, but it was really weird stuff. Like I started losing my vision. I started losing my capability to swallow. I became very weak. My shoulders, my hands, and things would just like slip out of place all of the time. So many symptoms, some of them you guys probably don't want to hear about, so I just won't mention them. But I ended up getting to the point where I was full-time looking for a diagnosis because it was just so bad. And the pain became so terrible and constant that I went the route of meeting with any doctor I could, every specialist I could, and they started searching for what was going on with me. And I would get one answer at a time. They're like, oh, yes, your brain gets into your spine. You have Chiari malformation, but that wouldn't cause this and this and this and this that you're talking about. And then we found brain lesions, and they asked me questions about abuse and things like that. And ultimately we came down to the amount of brain lesions that I had and the way that they were spreading didn't really make sense. So we did spinal tap looking for MS, did not find the MS proteins. So again, we were kind of left with, well, you have brain lesions, they're expanding, but we don't know why. And so it was process after process like that. And then I ended up getting neuropathy. My hands were going numb. I was having a hard time being able to pick up a fork. And then I started losing my cognitive capacity. I was saying wrong words, but then recognizing after that the word came out wrong. And it became really terrifying. On top of the pain, to feel like you're losing your brain became very, very terrifying for me. And I advanced into having extreme insomnia too, but mostly due to pain. Like I would lay down in bed, and an hour later, I was in such excruciating pain that I couldn't lay there anymore. So I'd have to get up and walk around, and this would go on all night, after night, after night. And I recognized how crucial sleep was to my survival. And I knew that I was on a slippery slope down and out. And then I continued on the search for doctors. I wasn't able in Western medicine to find any answers for the longest time. So I started taking on anything, any type of doctor that people suggested to me. I went to chiropractors for my spine because I had a double S, side to side and forward to back. They couldn't really adjust anything. I would just slip back into really out of order, really crooked. I went to acupuncturists, and that's where I found out about my electromagnetivity. Because the acupuncturist put in the second needle, and he was kind of like, oh, this is something very unique. I've been looking for your sort of person for a long time. You have very high chi. So that was a really wonderful experience for me, all in all. After the acupuncturist, I went to energy healers. And the energy healer, she was very intuitive. This was my first experience with an energy healer at all. But the moment I stepped across the threshold in her home, she looked at me and she said, you're an empath. You're very, very much an empath. Do you know this about yourself? And I was like, excuse me, what's an empath? I don't really know what you're talking about. And so she proceeded to explain that to me. And I was amazed by it because I was like, yeah, I very much experience other people's everything. I very much compassionately care. That does make sense. So that was also an enlightening experience. So I got on the path of outside of Western medicine, discovering more and more about myself, but still no answers. That same energy healer, she continued to work with me from afar because you don't have to be in person to work with an energy healer. And she came back to me and she said, I wanted to tell you that your ancestors have made it known to me that it's in your blood. Some of them suffered from this too, and they're very, very sorry, but they're all supporting you. And I was like, okay, it's in my blood. So I started searching for blood diseases back in Western medicine, and we couldn't find anything there except for really, really off the charts levels of Lyme. But then the Western blot from Lyme's disease said I didn't exactly have Lyme's disease. So that was more indicative of lupus. So there was another thing on the charts of diagnosis. And they found Epstein-Barr virus reoccurring. Said that my blood showed markers of that several times throughout my lifetime. And I'm like, yeah, well, that makes sense that I've experienced mono several times. So we did find some blood answers, but not the true answer. And then I became overwhelmed with the pain and the financial costs, the burdens. I felt like I was sapping everything from my family, everything. All I wanted was to be a mom, to, spend time in the garden, to go vacations, to hike, to do those things, but my body was logistically just falling apart. And my finances, they just couldn't afford to keep paying for these things. So I took a year off. That was 2017. I basically looked to the sky one night and I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm done with this search. And like, if the answer is going to come to me, let it come to me. But I'm just going to focus on living.
I just want to jump in real quick. So how old are your kids at this point?
Right now? My daughter,
right now.
Right now, Abby's 19 and Aiden is 14.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was in 2017 that I took that break. So Abby would have been 13. And I really had a wonderful year focusing on joy. And it was really meant to be that I focused on joy and just living, because then the miracles started coming. When I said, hey, I've done everything I can. I'm stepping back. I am not doing this search anymore. I'm not focusing on it. I'm going to play. I'm going to focus on my kids and do the things I want, because if I'm dying, I'm going to make it good. I'm going to die well. I'm going to die with a smile on my face, because it really very, very much felt like I was dying. I mean, at that time, I could talk for maybe 30, 40 seconds at a time without my throat collapsing on itself. And I would aspirate all the time and couldn't swallow food without really, really concentrating and trying. So it was pretty bad. It was very scary. My head, I also was diagnosed with cranial cervical instability. So my head was falling off my body. So clearly it looked like better play or, go out sad. And towards the end of 2017, my aunt, who I had been reporting all of my medical reports to, because she's like this family genius. She's a wonderful person to work with. She had a niece who I am not related to in any way. She's on the other side of the family, on my aunt's other side of the family. So twice removed from me, no DNA at all connected here. Her niece went into the hospital in San Francisco with a brain bleed. And the doctors in San Francisco said, hey, we don't think we can operate on you. We think you have this thing called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Do you have anybody in your family that can look back at your family records and verify if this looks like a trend in your family? So she, of course, believed in the same aunt I believed in, and they went straight to her, and she began researching her niece. As she went through it that night, she stayed up all night long because it was an emergency situation. She also put her husband, who is my blood-related relative, on the case, and he's also brilliant, and I thank him so much. They both stayed up all night and researched, and like, sure enough. But the whole time they kept thinking, Elizabeth, this is exactly what she has too. Oh my, we're seeing it here, we're seeing it here, we're seeing it here. And on her mother's side of the family, we're seeing it there. And so they ended up verifying with the San Francisco doctors, yes, we do believe that. Her niece was then sent off for a geneticist to verify. After that point, they weren't able to do the surgery for her. Luckily, she lived. Thank you. So glad that she lived. But my aunt and uncle also helped me find a geneticist here in Florida. And I traveled to the opposite coast that I live on and met with him. And this geneticist gave me the mothership. He told me, this is your overall diagnosis. You have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and all of these other things that you've been dealing with through the comorbidities. So the comorbidity is a disease or a problem that arises after the main factor, or like branches off of it, more or less. So that's why I had so many varying things, because that's the nature of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's what a lot of people suffer from. And the thing that makes us so hard to diagnose is that each of us is different. None of us have the exact same thing. So like I expressed in her niece having a brain bleed, I never had that. But if we both had that, then it would be clear to doctors, oh, this is what they have going on. But Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is so complicated because we're all very different. connective tissue disorder is really what it is. And connective tissue makes up 40% of our bodies. So if you think 40% of your body, any part of that can go very wrong. It could be different for every single person. So that kind of catches you up to my diagnosis. After diagnosis, I always felt like I was on my own dealing with this because everything that happened to me was so crazy. I'm like, now I can't swallow. Well, now my eyes won't track. Now I can't drive anymore. Oh, my hands aren't working. Oh, my shoulders slipped out. Oh, I woke up with my jaws out of place. All these things would happen, and I felt so alone. And I would express it to my doctors and my family, but nobody understood. And when I received my diagnosis, and the doctor said, "Oh yeah, this is a known thing. We've known about it since Hippocrates." I thought for just a moment, I was like, "Oh, there's other people like me out there. There's somebody else that understands this. I don't feel so alone anymore." But my response to him when he told me that it was unfixable was the entire reason that I wanted to know my diagnosis was so that I could fix it. And he said, "I'm sorry, dear, but it's not fixable. You've got to wrap your head around this. Your prognosis is bound to get worse. We'll do everything we can for you, but you need to wrap your head around it. This is what you have." And I looked back at him and I was like, no, that's not what I wanted to know. And then I went home and started reaching out to other people with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome in the attempts to help them feel less alone. Reaching out and just cheering them on and saying, I care. I hope that your surgery goes well. I hope that you feel better. But I learned that hope really becomes a 4-letter word to most of us, and it becomes quite painful to hear when things continue to fail on you. And I continued to get worse as I tried to help other people that way with my love and attention. And so I decided that I would go back to my original intention, and that was to fix what was going on with me. So under the stars on New Year's at the beach here, I stood in the ocean and I was very wobbly. I could barely stand on my own 2 feet. I certainly could not sit on the floor or anything and get myself back up. I had a hard time sitting in a movie theater. It was too painful. My head would just sink off. I didn't want to use neck braces because I didn't feel that was the right route. So I was in a really, really bad position, and I did what would be maybe considered crazy and aimed way beyond the stars. And I said, I want the greatest health possible and peace for myself and others. And I said, I promise I'll share it. Just grant it to me, I'll share it. And that's where everything began. That's where the real healing journey began. But it began much like the first part of my life. Like a roller coaster. About a month after I declared my intention with the cosmos and source, I ended up with painful breasts. And I thought, you know what, I better go get this checked out because I've never felt like this before. And sure enough, I had tumors, and quite a few of them. And so I had them biopsied, and it was determined that I needed to have these tumors removed immediately. They were very invasive, very fast spreading, rare type. I had rare associated calcifications as well. So I met with the surgeon, and the surgeon told me that she did not want to go in and remove these tumors until she had a full MRI to make sure they had not spread to my liver. But to do this MRI, I had to do it exactly 7 to 10 days after my cycle. And when I was meeting with her, I was right at the point that I had missed that window. So I had to wait for my next cycle. In the meantime, I went out to my car, sat in the parking lot, threw my head down on the steering wheel. I was just like, is cancer going to be the one that takes me down? After all this, after all I fought for my life, after everything I've tried, cancer is going to be what takes me? And I was like, no, nope. Cancer can be healed. Other people have lived through it. I can make it through this. And I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to stick to my intention. This is just one other thing. This is just one other thing. And I'm really, really good at dealing with things. And so I decided that I wasn't going to tell anybody except for my husband when I was going through with this. And that was an intentional decision because, one, I did not want my children to be afraid. And two, I did not want other people inserting their fears on me, or even asking questions that I would have to answer, and me having to voice over and over and over, this is what I'm doing, this is the route I've decided to take, etc. So I did keep it very private. And because I stuck to my desire, my intention, I started to do things very differently. I went into stores and I would just grab different food off of the shelf. And not even, I remember like very specifically grabbing flax seeds and putting them in my cart and going, I don't know what to do with these, but I'm feeling like I need to buy them. And when I got home, I just knew how to prepare foods with everything that I had bought. It just kind of started flowing into me. And I realized that I was intuitively receiving this information, and even my ideas of what to purchase. Because in the past, I had learned a few things about my intuition. We can get back to that later. But I started realizing that everything that was going on was very intuitive. Did I have a full belief that it was working? Not exactly, not yet. But I'm like, I'm going with it. There's nothing else I can do while I wait. If I am forced to wait for this MRI, I might as well just go with whatever and do this. And so I came to the point where I should be in for the MRI because it's the right time to cycle, and it didn't show up. So I'm like, oh no, what, am I pregnant? And then it didn't show up the next month. So I went for 2.5 months without it. And that was very, very, very abnormal for me. But as soon as it was the right time, I went in, had that MRI, and the reports were sent to my surgeon. I was called in for an appointment, and I was like, okay, what are we going to do here? What's going to happen? What's my news? And she came out shaking my paperwork, and she's like, I'm calling my nurses in. She's like, come here, ladies. They all came in, and she's like, I have never seen this before. I looked it up on my computer. It's never been reported before. Your type of tumors have never dissolved. But what you have going on, there's nothing left. There is nothing for me to do surgery on. And she said to me, she said, what did you do? Please tell me what you've done. And so I started writing down like keywords to her. I'm like catechins and this type of fasting and this and that. And I gave her a whole note card full of everything. And she winked at me and she said, I need to refer you to the oncologist because you are very, very high risk for cancer, having been through this at such a young age. But wink, wink, keep on doing what you're doing. So
wow.
I really, 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 really gained confidence in the process after that. And I, in my thinking, I looked back and I was like, okay, this was a gift. This was a very immediate emergency. And very immediately it was healed. And very verifiable that this had not been done before. And neither has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome been done before. So I have all of these signs and symbols telling me that I went through that. I braved it. I followed my intuition. I did not fall into fear. And I just went for it. I just listened. And it all worked out perfectly and with absolute proof. Wow. You know, so that really set me forth on my journey. And from that point, I decided to not listen to any podcasts, YouTubes, no TV whatsoever. I basically isolated myself from all media and decided to intuitively find my way through healing. So I spent the next 3.5 years intuitively grasping onto anything that my body told me I needed to do, writing down what was working, and then my book developed. So it was quite a magical process, but there's kind of the background on the health side of things.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm just over here trying not to cry.
I know, I almost did a few times.
That is so incredible.
Yeah, it's been a journey to say the least, but I will admit it was a very, very painful journey.
Yeah. So when was that point? So now it's been what, like 3 or 4 years since that? since you pretty much healed yourself of that?
So when I stood on the beach, it was New Year's of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely was not an immediate healing. It took a lot of work. I had to do everything step by step by step. And the way that the steps were determined were by what was causing me the most pain or the most loss. So I began with like maybe my cognitive capacity. I couldn't even read a book because my vision was so bad. And the optometrist is like, yeah, you're losing your eyesight from the outside in, and one eye seeing up and one eye seeing down, and you're, just basically slowly going blind. And because you have Alexander syndrome, your retina can detach at any random moment. So be aware of that. If you start seeing like camera flashes in your eyes, immediately come in. And I'm like, great. So I started working on my eyesight and my brain first because I knew I had to have those to be able to operate and keep the rest of my body put together. And the process goes all throughout the book, but I talk about healing neuropathy. I talk about healing the dysautonomia, which was the thing that was the very most terrifying that I went through.
What was that again?
Dysautonomia.
Dysautonomia.
So that is the breakdown of the autonomic nervous system. So peripheral neuropathy, more people are familiar with. That's where anything that you tell to do with your body, like move your hands, move your lips, things like that. When you're speaking, grab something, that's all peripheral. And so that's a different nervous system than your autonomic. Your autonomic nervous system is everything that happens automatic. So you think your breathing, your heartbeat, your digestion, sweat, all of those things that automatically happen in you is your autonomic. So you can imagine when I started having dysautonomia and as it became quite advanced, this was the thing that was absolutely the most terrifying to me. That's what made me feel like I was going to die very soon. But in the book, I write about how I went about healing dysautonomia as well. And basically everything else that I went through. But yeah, whatever was the most pain, whatever was the most antagonizing was what I worked on first. So my body determined the first, second, third, and fourth steps. And then as each thing became better and better, my trust and my intuition grew stronger and stronger and stronger. So.
Wow, that's incredible. I love your very logical, and like whatever needs the most help with, that's what I'm going to start with. So that makes sense. I wondered, since we don't have very much time left, can you tell us a little bit about your near-death experience? Thank goodness I was actually, shout out to Liz for referring you or referring your name to me. But I definitely wanted to ask about your near-death experience because I hear that you do have like full recall from what happened.
Yes, I do. Okay, so it was when I was in the hospital as a teenager with my surgeries. Like I said, they had to keep going back in and my body was not holding together. If you can imagine having a wound from hip to hip and several tubes coming out of you, constant blood transfusions, wow, and the inability to respond well to pain medications. The morphine was not working that they had me on. So I was in extreme pain. And then I lost my identity when they told me that I would never be a mother. As far as they could see, my body would never be able to do that. And they also said I wouldn't be able to return to sports. And that is kind of what I felt made me important to all of my peers and even sometimes to my parents. They loved me, my parents loved me otherwise, but that's what they would cheer for me for. And so my ego was attached to those things. And so I lost my identity for future, for present, and my pain was so excruciating that I got to the point where I could see no end of the pain. There really wasn't one. They had on the door a sign that said, "Do not make her laugh." And it was a very, very strict instruction because if I was to smile or laugh, something would come apart. It was that fragile. So I got to where I, in my mind, thought really there is nothing for me. and this pain is too much. And so I held my breath, and I did not have the trigger to breathe again. So it's highly, highly likely that I was suffering dysautonomia at that time as well. The morphine probably played into that because it does have the capability to slow the autonomic nervous system, and you can lose triggers like that. But I quit breathing and flatlined. And during the time that I was out of body, I remember I looked down on my body. I could see me, but at the same time, I was aware of everybody and everything. So if you can picture what jellyfish look like in the water, they exist, but they're see-through, and you can see like a little bit of outlines, but you know, they're very see-through, translucent to you. That is what walls seemed like. I knew that they existed, but they were no boundaries. So I watched my body, I watched nurses run towards me, and then I kind of fell into the feeling of it. The feeling of all awareness at once. And it wasn't overwhelming. It was very, very, very peaceful. It was like I always understood it and always knew it. So it was more natural to me than it felt to be in my body and thinking, to be able to like sense everything at one time. I even knew what my father was doing at home, which I repeated to him later, and he verified. He's like, yeah, I was eating clam chowder, reading the newspaper, and yes, I did sneak the dog in the house that your mom is allergic to and is not allowed in the house. So I was able to verify these things too. Yeah, it was really incredible that way. But when I was feeling everything, I felt what my choice would also be. I felt if I did not choose to come back, what would happen in my siblings' lives and in my parents' lives. And I felt my doctors and really every single person that I had ever had contact with. I felt all of their emotions, all of their feelings of what would happen if I did not choose to come back. And also how I impacted them in their life. I felt like it just loaded into me. And I also started to receive information of what was next if I chose to stay, exit this lifetime. And this is the part that I feel is very, very, very beautiful. I was raised in a religion, and the religion taught us very strictly of this is what happens after you die, and you have this judgment, and you go to here or you go to here, and it's based upon this or on that. And what I understood in that time when I was choosing between my choices was not what I was taught. So it was very different than what I had really been conditioned with and indoctrinated with as a young person. And what it truly was there were two questions that I would be asked. And it was a self-review. It wasn't a judgment against me by any being, not by source, not by Christ or any other entity that people believe in as for judgment. It was, did you allow yourself to love? Really allow yourself to love. And the other question was, how do you feel you did with your life mission? How did you feel? It wasn't like a, did you fail or did you complete it? It was just more like a, let's let you look at yourself and think, how did you do? What would you do better? And collect wisdom like that. So I really began after that point in time when I returned to body. I did a couple of things, and one of them I now look back on and understand as a human mistake that I made with very good intentions. So you can have very good intentions and still not understand fully what you're doing, but I contracted myself after I was back in my body and on the healing path, because at that time I also did receive some intuitive wisdoms on how to actually heal my body, which are written in the book. But I contracted that I would never hurt my mother, ever. And so I spent a lot of time trying to be perfect because I felt her as if I was to pass, and I felt so much in that I made that contract. And so
that you would never heal your mother?
No, that I would never hurt her. I would never do anything that
hurt your mother.
Yes.
Okay.
Like, so before, I mean, maybe I was a little sassy, I would challenge things, kids, right? So I contracted with myself, having understood the level of pain, love, and joy that is within her, that I never ever wanted to do anything to hurt her. So I spent the next while doing everything I could to be perfect. But that I came to learn as I aged and gained wisdom. And very specifically, as I wrote the book and looking back, that I was giving myself away. And that is not the contract to do. Really, we're all here to help each other learn. And sometimes the other person may feel hurt by that learning. But as I learned, as I healed my body and my mind and my soul, that pain is oftentimes a trigger for us to take action and look into ourselves and say, what is this about? Why is this? And I don't want to experience this again. So can I really go through myself and understand why this is circling in my life so that I don't have to experience it again? So anyhow, that was a contract that I made that was not perfect. But I also, with the understanding of the two questions that were being asked with me, again, not against me, not as a judgment, but as a self-review, did you really love? It did something in me that I see the light in all people. Like, to me, there is no person that is evil. There are things that they've experienced that make them react in a way that appears as evil. But all of us are very, very lovable. And so I had a hard time navigating through high school with that understanding within my heart, because, there were cruel things that were done to me from time to time. And I would just think like, man, I would be the best friend you could ever have if you would just allow me to be. So it really changed. It changed me from the heart sense that way. And as far as the judgment went, it was really placed on me when I was still trying to be perfect. I was still trying to be a part of the religion and, not understanding to separate it. But as I wrote the book, I came back around to understand that more and more, and understand the near-death experience that I went through, and review that question over and over and over again. Did I do my life role? And I began to understand and feel that really the only sin, if you want to call it sin, is not completing what you, yourself, your soul intended to do. It's not all these other things that are placed on us that are giving us guilt and shame and making us feel worthless. Because when we feel guilt and shame and worthless, that is when disease begins to arise in us, and we don't even understand that that's happening. So anyway, the near-death experience definitely played an extreme amount into me healing when I chose to refocus on it as an adult and look at the things that I misunderstood from my human perspective and my conditioning.
Awesome. Okay, so what advice would you give somebody if they were in that place of or feeling pain or health struggles? What advice would you give them for self-healing?
So I would advise to recognize that you are a very, very powerful being. All of us have the capability to heal ourselves. And it is to take focus away from feeling like a victim or like this is happening to me, and really start to go into your heart. Your heart center is really a place of wisdom, much more than the mind. Our mind has a lot of conditioning, things that we've been taught, things that we've been told, and things that we don't even understand that we have created biases around. But our heart is always truthful. And it is the center that will start telling you, when you pay attention to it, do this, try this, meet this person, ask this question. And if you can act on a whim, even when it seems like a little bit crazy, and start doing those things, answers will come to you. It's a very, very, very magical process. Like, literally, I would call it a game, because it becomes so fun and so exciting to watch the miracles just arise in your life when you can let go of the conditioned mind thinking and trying to control and trying to overpower, and realize that the things that your body is telling you, signaling you, They're there for a reason. They're telling you something needs to change, or something in the past is still affecting you that you need to think about. And so the changes can be foods you're eating. They can be the types of medicines that you're taking. They're not working for you. They're not in your body's best interest. They can be relationships that you have. They can be, again, past trauma that you've experienced. But we're able to clear that once we can acknowledge that we have that, we become aware of it. There are healers out there that can help us through these things, and we can help ourselves. We're very, very powerful beings that way. So I would advise just opening your mind up and listening to your heart for sure, and seek people that are, if you're in pain and you continue to be in pain, look for something different. It doesn't help you to keep doing the same thing you've always done, going to the same advice you've always been going to. Doesn't make sense. If you want to heal, expand.
Yes. I love this conversation. I wish we could keep going, but maybe I could have you back and we could talk again. I
would love that.
Okay, that'd be awesome. What is your website so people could connect with you and they can get your book on the website, right? This is an amazing book.
Yeah, they can. Yep, they can get it on the website, or it's easy to find on Amazon, whichever they trust and prefer. My website is E as in electro, M as in magnetic, holistic.com.
emholistic.com. Okay.
Yep.
And I'll put that in the comments and description as well. Awesome. Well, I thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you. And I'm so inspired by your story, and I look forward to talking with you even more and learning more from you, because I'm just on chapter 2, but this book is already really good. So highly recommend anyone to check it out. So.
Thank you, Chelsea. I appreciate you inviting me to your platform. Such an honor. I appreciate what you do. Great person. Great things you're doing in this world. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth. I appreciate you so much. And I'm so happy that you're doing so much better. It's worlds apart from where you were. So I'm very inspired.
No pain and all play. I am loving life right now very much. It's just more than exciting.
You successfully made it to the other side of pain and suffering. So congratulations. That's incredible. And I just want to let you, the audience, know that healing is possible for you.
It is.
It absolutely is. Okay, well, thank you so much. And I hope everybody has a lovely evening.
Thank you.